House Divided by Brother Todd Bennett of ShemaYisrael.net. Shalom all. Today is day 2 of month 4 on the Creator's calendar, also known as July 2nd, 2022 on the Roman calendar. If you didn't understand that we are still under the shadow of Rome, this month should be very obvious. The month of July is actually named after Julius Caesar, the first Roman emperor to be deified. It is a yearly reminder that we are still living within a Roman system. The fourth beast in the image of the beast, whose head is Babylon, see Daniel 2 and 7. As most of you are aware, I did not send out a message last Shabbat because I had a privilege of sharing at the Battle Cry event sponsored by the United in Yah. And this is an author's note, or the reader's note, is I did not participate in any of this, nor would have had I been invited, because they mixed religions in all of it. There was a whole bunch of different believers and a whole bunch of different beliefs. Some people believe that Yah is Yahushua, and Yahushua is Yah, and I'm not going to mix the faith. And so I stayed completely away from the entire United in Yah event. I shared some information about the covenant land, and one of the things I pointed out was how water was a critical factor in the covenant land. Yahuwah specifically chose a land that was different from the surrounding nations. For the land which you go to possess is not like the land of Egypt, from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and watered by foot as a vegetable garden. But the land which you cross over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water from the rain of heaven, a land for which Yahuwah your Elohim cares. The eyes of Yahuwah your Elohim are always on it, from the beginning of the year to the very end of the year. And it shall be that if you earnestly obey my commandments, which I command you today, to love Yahuwah your Elohim and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will give you the rain for your land in its season, the early rain and the latter rain, that you may gather in your grain, your new wine, and your oil. And I will send grass in your fields for your livestock, that you may eat and be filled. Take heed to yourselves, lest your heart be deceived, and you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. Lest Yahuwah's anger be aroused against you, and he shut up the heavens, so that there be no rain, and the land yield no produce, and you perish quickly from the good land which Yahuwah is giving you. Egypt had the Nile, and the Babylon had the Euphrates. These great rivers actually created borders of the land promised to Abram. See Genesis 15:18. Those who lived in the covenant land needed rain. So the Israelites needed to trust Yahuwah for the rains, the early rains, and the latter rains, for the majority of their water. Of course, Yahuwah made it easy for them to trust him. Remember when they came out of Egypt? He led them into a wilderness where there was no water, and he provided water from a rock. If he can do that, surely he can provide rain from the heavens. When the waters came, they needed to store it up in cisterns until the next rains. The important thing to remember was that the water was conditional. If they wanted the blessings, they needed to obey. If they experienced drought and famine, it was because there was a problem. This is not superstition. It was the way that Yahuwah established a covenant people in his covenant land. It is a critical lesson that Christianity in large part has rejected, forgotten, or ignored. Most Christians neglect the relationship between obedience that brings about blessings and disobedience that results in curses. They call that bedrock principle legalism, and insist that they are no longer under the law. They insist that they are under grace, which means they don't have to obey the commandments. Having rejected the righteous instructions contained in the Torah, many find themselves in a perpetual state of confusion and curses because they are lawless. Yahushua described them as you who practice lawlessness, Matthew 7:23. The so-called Christian nation of America is an absolute spiritual and moral mess. This is largely because Christianity has promoted lawlessness instead of obedience to the commandments. While they claim that the Bible is the inherent Word of God, they teach that much of it was abolished or irrelevant. Of course, modern Christianity has also adopted the drive-through mentality of the society that it exists within. Nowadays, if you are sick, just go to a healing service. If you are poor, ask God if you can win the lottery. If you're addicted to something, just ask God to cure you. A simple prayer or a trip to the altar is all that is needed for what ails you. Now, I'm not saying that he won't provide an instantaneous or supernatural miracle, but that is usually the exception, not the rule. While he wants the best for you, he wants you to learn how to walk with him. He wants to know you, and he wants you to know him through his covenant, not some lawless religious system. First and foremost, he wants us to learn how to obey him so that we can experience the truth of his promises. Case in point, Yahuwah brought the Israelites into a good land that was fully prepared for their arrival. The cisterns were dug and ready. The vineyards, orchards, and olive groves were planted. The walls were built. So this is from Nehemiah. So the people went in and possessed the land. You subdued before them the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, and gave them into their hands, with their kings and the people of the land, and they might do with them as they wished. And they took strong cities and a rich land, and possessed houses full of all goods, cisterns already dug, vineyards, olive groves, and fruit trees in abundance. So they ate and were filled, and grew fat, and delighted themselves in your great goodness. Nehemiah 9:24 and 25. Yirmiyahu. That's not Yirmiyahu. It takes a lot of work to dig cisterns and water systems. It takes a lot of time to plant orchards and vineyards that yield fruit. The hard work was already done. Here's another take from Deuteronomy. So it shall be when Yahuwah your Elohim brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, to give you a large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, when you have eaten and are full. Deuteronomy 6:10-11. It appears that the houses actually came fully furnished. So this was a turnkey operation. It was exactly like when Yahuwah planted the Garden of Eden and then placed the man and woman in it. Everything was provided for them, but they still had work to do. They had to watch and tend over the garden of Yahuwah. It still belonged to Yahuwah. The man and the woman were simply caretakers and custodians. The same was true for the Israelites in the Promised Land. They had to maintain what Yahuwah had entrusted with them. They had to regularly report to him at the appointed times and give him rent in the form of tithes and offerings. They didn't own the land. The covenant land belongs to Yahuwah. It always did, and it always will. It does not belong to the Jewish people, or the Israelite people for that matter. The tribes were accountable. If they failed their duties, they would be fired and escorted off the premises, and that is exactly what happened. While there are promises of a return, it is only for those who are washed clean and obedient. The terms of a return needed to be renegotiated, and that is exactly what Yahushua did when he renewed the covenant. That renewal of the covenant was a divine act of mercy and grace. Sadly, the Christian notion of grace has polluted the churches and even their understanding of prophecy. How could Messiah Yahushua die for the sins of the world and then say it's okay to keep on sinning? It's ludicrous. But that's the essence of Christian grace, because they threw out the definition for sin. They now claim that they aren't under the law because Messiah Yahushua died on the cross. What they failed to understand is that the grace was the fact that he died to atone for their sins. He sent the Spirit to give them power to obey, and he taught them how to obey. Grace involved the fact that the covenant was renewed through his blood. We are no longer under the curse of the law, which involved the punishment for disobedience and sin. Sadly, most Christians utterly miss the context and the purpose of Yahushua's first coming, and many may find themselves the subject of his wrath when he returns. Most are completely ignore the importance of the covenant land and apply the same sloppy, unscriptural understanding of grace to the promised land. We know that the assembly of Yisrael was divided into 2 houses and 2 kingdoms after the death of King Shlomo. The northern tribes were called the house of Yisrael, and the southern tribes were the house of Yehudah. Now, the fact that the northern tribes, led by Ephraim, carried this name of Yisrael is highly significant. We currently see the Jewish people who claim to represent the house of Yehudah laying claim to the name Yisrael and all the land. That is a mistake. We know for sure that Yahuwah expelled the house of Yisrael and the house of Yehudah from the covenant land because of their disobedience. Incredibly, most Christians think that he brought the Jewish people back and now wants to give them all the covenant land, even though they reject his Torah and are vehemently opposed to his son. That is a warped understanding of a just Elohim, and I'm quite certain there are going to be a lot of terrified and shocked Christians and Jews when the Messiah returns drenched in blood with a sword and a rod of iron to claim that land. Here's what the Bible describes. Now I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Elohim. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of El Shaddai. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Revelation 19:11-16. There is such a disparity between the truth that is in the Word and is the Word and the way people practice their religion and live their lives. Most of the Christian religion is completely detached from the covenant assembly of Yisrael and the covenant land. This is despite the fact that Messiah Yahushua came to renew the broken covenant with the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael. Matthew 15:24. Just as Christianity has lost its moorings, like a ship lost at sea ready to crash into the rocks, so has the United States, and the world for that matter. There is so much division in Christianity and in America, they are both falling quickly, like a house of cards. A prime example of the divide in America could be seen when the Supreme Court finally handing down their decision in the Dobbs versus Jackson case on June 24, 2022. While many people are celebrating the decision, some are getting ahead of themselves. I heard one Christian commenter state that now America won't be judged. Wait, what? So because of a long overdue Supreme Court decision that gives the states the right to decide the issue, Yahuwah will now just forget about the 60 million plus innocent lives that were murdered? I don't think so. It's not what a symptom of greasy grace. If that's not a symptom of greasy grace, I don't know what is. As I mentioned previously, the Supreme Court decision doesn't make abortion illegal. It simply places it on the states to decide. The simple fact is that many states will definitely make abortion legal, and many will make it illegal. Innocent babies will still continue to be murdered in America. It's just a matter of where. I wonder if this is how Yahuwah will separate his people in preparation for the coming judgment. This nation is not only divided on politics, religion, and a plethora of social and moral issues, it is also becoming physically divided. People are moving based upon these issues. If you remain in a state that continues to foster and promote abominations, you may want to consider Lot. While Yahuwah does not destroy the righteous with the wicked, he will give warning. If you fail to heed the warning, you may find yourself suffering the consequences. Let's face it, Lot knew how bad things were, well in advance of the judgment on Sodom, but he decided to wait it out. Maybe he was holding out for a new leader who would make Sodom great again. The simple fact is that he should have been set apart, kadosh. If you chose to remain in the cities run by bloodthirsty, perverted degenerates who promote and practice abominations, then don't be surprised if you find yourself fleeing with only the clothes on your back. Yahuwah is surely going to judge those who commit these horrible abominations and those who promote them. The bloodthirsty people on the left of the American political spectrum are enraged with the Supreme Court decision. They want women to continue to have the right to choose whether or not to murder their children. Remember, it is not their body or their life that they are terminating. That would be suicide. The abortion process involves killing another life that relies upon the mother until birth. Voluntarily killing that unborn child is probably one of the most vile and abominable acts that a woman can perform. It completely defies the incredible role that Elohim gave her within his creation. Giving birth is an amazing gift and privilege that the Creator bestowed upon women alone. The evil in this world is attempting to blur gender distinctions and cancel any trace of order set forth in creation. In fact, the darkness wants to actually cancel Yahuwah Elohim and his light. Soon enough, all will be getting a personal introduction from him, and that is why it is vital that we continue to shine as his light. It is interesting that those who advocate for abortion are typically the same people who want to abolish the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. The most violent and bloodthirsty members of our society are the ones trying to take guns away from others, apparently for safety reasons. I wish they were actually concerned as much for the safety of innocent unborn babies. Kind of ironic and hypocritical. Speaking of the right to bear arms, it's interesting how some Christians have a very pacifist view of Yahuwah and his son when the scriptures are quite opposite. The Christian religion attempts to portray Jesus as a wimpy man with frail body, long hair, and feminine qualities. To the contrary, Yahushua was likely very strong. Yahushua is described as a craftsman, tekton in the Greek, and nagar in the Aramaic. That word does not exclusively refer to a carpenter. It could mean he was a builder. Since there are many more stones than trees in the land, people generally built with stone. You cannot be weak if you are going to build with stone. I believe that he whipped the merchants in the temple more than once for profaning his father's house. He was very confrontational. He was offensive to many, and was not shy about insulting people with the truth. You should do a study on the various names that he called the scribes and Pharisees. Just because he showed restraint and allowed himself to be crucified does not mean that he was not a strong man. In fact, he had both inner and physical strength. He won't be restraining himself any longer when we see his return as described above. As I pointed out last week, at the closing of the battle cry event, Yahuwah is described as a man of war by Moses. Yahuwah is a man of war. Yahuwah is his name, Exodus 15:3. Also, Yisrael was described as armies when they marched out of Egypt. And it came to pass on that very same day that Yahuwah brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt according to their armies. Exodus 12:51. The simple fact is that Yisrael is an army of Yahuwah. They fought many battles with their commander, who led them and often did all of the fighting for them. Remember Jericho? How about the Battle of Gibeon? Many people miss the fact that some of the disciples of Yahushua carried swords. At least one was a zealot, and some speculate that Judas Iscariot belonged to the Sicarii, a violent group who assassinated Romans with knives in a quest to regain the land. Remember when he stated, "But now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one." Luke 22:36. Their response was, "Master, look, here are 2 swords." Luke 22:38. His response was, "It is enough." He didn't tell them to sell their swords or give them away once they decided to follow him. He told them to buy a sword. Now, obviously, he wasn't encouraging them to take on Rome in a physical battle with 2 swords. That wasn't the plan, just like it's not the plan to overthrow any government now with your AR-15. Leave the judging of nations to Yahuwah and Yahushua. Nevertheless, it is prudent and proper to be able to protect and defend your family. The Israelites had to, even when they were in the promised land. Why would things be any different while we are in exile? Ultimately, Yahuwah fights our battles, and if he is not with you, you fight in vain. So it is imperative that we are always following the orders of our commander, not running off on our own picking fights with the enemy. Remember the words of David as he stood in front of the giant. "Then all this assembly shall know that Yahuwah does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is Yahuwah's, and he will give you into our hands." 1 Samuel 17:47. David didn't try to fight Goliath wielding a sword or spear and wearing armor. He used what he knew, the slingshot. Interestingly, there's a question regarding what weapon actually killed Goliath. We later read. So David prevailed over the Philistines and a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in his hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. 1 Samuel 17:50 and 51. Was it the stone that stunk into his forehead, or was it when David actually cut off Goliath's head with his own sword that Goliath was killed? That sword became a symbol, and there is some tradition that it ended up in Ireland. That might make a good Indiana Jones sequel. The important point is that we need to be ready to participate in the battle. When he says fight, we must be ready to fight. When he says don't fight, we must not engage. Remember when the Israelites listened to the bad reporting regarding the giants and rebelled? They missed their window of opportunity. When they realized their mistake, they then decided to go fight. But Yahuwah was not with them, and they were defeated. Here is one account. "And they rose up early in the morning and went up to the top of the mountain, saying, 'Here are we, and we will go up to the place which Yahuwah has promised, for we have sinned.' And Moshe said, 'Now why do you transgress the command of Yahuwah? For this will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you be defeated by your enemies, for Yahuwah is not among you. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you shall fall by the sword, because you have turned away from Yahuwah. Yahuwah will not be with you.' But they presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Nevertheless, neither the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah nor Moshe departed from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that mountain came down and attacked them and drove them back as far as Hormah." Numbers 14:40-45. So while Yisrael is an army, they are only a victorious army if they are obedient and Yahuwah is with them. There are consequences for disobedience. That is simply the way things are. The Israelites believed that they were under grace, that they could just run up the mountain and proceed with the original plan in their own timing and in their own strength. They were sadly mistaken. We must wait upon Yahuwah and trust him to direct our paths. I also spent a lot of time in my presentation last week talking about the ancient sites that Abram and the patriarchs visited because they had great significance. They built altars so we could remember the lessons from the path that they blazed. Remember when Yaakov returned from Haran? Rachel, the wife that he truly adored, brought idols with her. Jacob probably knew about it, or at least her propensity for idols. That was the reason why Laban chased them down. But Jacob didn't rebuke Rachel for her conduct. Well, Rachel was a good thief. She hid Laban's idols well and was apparently a persuasive liar because she ended up keeping them. After moving to Jordan and meeting Esau, Jacob moved his family to Shechem. They interacted with the Canaanites and even bought land nearby. Shechem was a major Canaanite religious site, and it appeared that they had plans to settle there. Do you think had anything to do with those idols that Rachel brought with her? They definitely did not remain set apart. The scriptures record that Dinah went out to see the daughters of the land, Genesis 34:1. Well, a lot of bad things transpired at Shechem involving Dinah, and 2 swords wielded by Simeon and Levi. You can read about it in Genesis 34, also in Jasher as well. I think Jubilees accounts for it. No wonder Yahushua told his disciples that the 2 swords was enough. After that event, Elohim told Jacob to go down to Bethel. Even though they had just settled down, they needed to remove. Read what Jacob instructed his family. And Yaakov said to his household and to all that were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to Elohim, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me in the way which I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods which were in their hands, and the earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree which was by Shechem. Genesis 35, 2-4. They had just come from Hernan, which was in the land of Babylon. They brought Babylon with them, and it appears that Rachel was not the only one with the idols. They needed to get cleaned up and go to Bethel. I wonder why Jacob hid them and didn't destroy them. The terebinth tree at Shechem was previously visited by Abram, and he had built an altar there. I talked about the significance of the tree during the battle cry event. Another one of the places that I talked about in my presentation was Bethel, Bet El. It means the house Bet of Elohim El. This was also a place that Abram visited and built an altar. Yaakov previously slept there on his way out of the land. He had a vision of Elohim and anointed a stone referred to as a bin. The word abin is interesting because it is a combination of father and son. Yaakov later returned there with his family, and Yahuwah confirmed his name Yisrael at this important location. Genesis 35, 9-15. Then Elohim appeared to Yaakov again when he came from Padam Aram and blessed him. And Elohim said to him, your name is Yaakov. Your name shall not be called Yaakov anymore, but Yisrael shall be your name. So he called his name Yisrael. Also Elohim said to him, I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and the kings shall come from your body. The land which I give Abram and Isaac I give to you, and to your descendants after you I give this land. Then Elohim went up from him in the place where he talked with him. So Yaakov set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, a pillar of stone, a bin, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. And Yaakov called the place where Elohim spoke with him Bethel. This is a very prophetic place. It was so significant that King Jeroboam, in his fleshly quest to maintain power over the northern tribes, set up an abomination for the Israelites to worship. He set up a golden calf and slaughtered it upon the altar. He even changed the appointed times to distract the people from going to Jerusalem, 1 Kings 12, 32 and 33. Well, that was one of the primary reasons why the house of Yisrael was ejected from the land. Again, actions have consequences. The good news is that their time of punishment prophesied through Ezekiel and Moshe has expired. Ezekiel 4, 1-6 and Leviticus 26. So it's time for the house of Yisrael to be united once again. The problem is that there are many who are being called don't know how to detach from the only home they have known. The country where they were born. They are still rooted in Babylon. They don't want to move. They have family, jobs, and homes. They want to stay comfortable where they are. They want to stay where they are, comfortable. This is exactly what happened when only a remnant from the house of Yahudah returned from their Babylonian exile. The sad truth is that even exiled people would rather remain in Babylon. They would rather try to make Babylon great again with Donald Trump than help to make Zion great again with Yahushua. The simple truth is Yahushua said, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. Matthew 12:25. These prophetic words are being played out before our eyes in the cities and the states of the alleged United States of America right now. The House of Representatives is supposed to proportionally represent the people, while the Senate evenly represents the states. Both houses are divided, and while midterm elections may sway the balance, it will not heal the divide. We are watching the collapse of a once mighty kingdom. It is a house divided that cannot stand. Sadly, so many who should be seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness are focused on stopping the collapse. They don't understand the army they are in, and some are actually getting in the way of judgment. They may find themselves like Lot and his family. I suggest a different house. Have you ever been to Bet El? I can assure you that it is not a church on a corner or any Christian building for that matter. It is a place of building altars and confirming the covenant promises. It is a place to see Elohim and confirming your identity with Yisrael. It is a place of anointing and a place of unity with those who follow Yahushua. It is a place that Yahushua is preparing for his bride. Yahushua said, a house divided cannot stand. While Americans are celebrating Independence Day this weekend, the United States of America was actually birthed in Philadelphia on September 17, 1787, when the Constitution was signed. The U.S. Constitution is an incredible document, but its power is fading, and the country governed by it will not stand forever. The only way we're going to stand is if we are in the house built by Yahushua. Now read the words from Yahushua to the Assembly of Philadelphia in Asia Minor. I do not believe this was a coincidence. Because you have kept my command to preserve, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the house of my Elohim, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my Elohim and the name of the city of my Elohim, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my Elohim, and I will write on him my new name. Revelations 3, 10 through 12. Now that is a better promise for the better future that we should be holding on to with all our strength. I pray that we may be kept kadosh from the hour of trial and made pillars in the eternal house of Elohim, Bet El, found in the New Jerusalem. Baraka, Todd. ShemaYisrael.net.